another segment of Real People, Real Conversations. Today we are with Reverend Dr. Jeff Phillpot and Reverend Dr. Malcom Walls, and we will be talking about their topic for our annual training, which is ethnic unity and social justice. Welcome, y'all.
Hey, thanks for having us. Hey, okay, so my name is Jeff Phillpot. I'm the lead pastor at Sandhills Community Church. Started the church back in 1998, and it's been an awesome experience. We're located in Northeast Columbia, and a real integral part of our journey was to make sure that we saw in our community ethnic unity. So one of our hearts in reflecting God's heart for the world was to say that God has a heart for all people. And though we are prone to divide, God is prone to unite, and we want to do whatever we can to see people come together. And so it has been 22 years of fighting that battle, and it's been great. Loved it.
I am Malcom Walls. I am the pastor of Outreach Next Steps here at Sandhills as well, serving alongside of my leader, Dr. Jeff Phillpot. I think between the two of us, we have been on this journey collectively for about, I would say, 40 plus years, seeking ethnic unity in the church. And I have been here at the church for 3 years. And so Jeff and I have been on this journey together 3 years now. And it's been great to be on this journey with my brother. And so I'm just excited. Hopefully it keeps me around for 20, 30 more years.
Amen.
Right, and again, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here today. So I was reading your session description and I saw that you mentioned a third space. Now, I wanted to start off with going ahead and talking a little bit about what that is.
Right. So go ahead. You want to start, Malcom? I can start and hand it off to you. I know we're going to be careful here about how weird we get in front of Maria. So, we do get a little weird when we talk about this. Okay, so we're ministers, right? So everything we believe and teach comes out of our understanding of what God wants for us through Scripture and as He's expressed it. And so, to sum it up, quickly would be the idea that when I grew up in my cultural sphere, however I've grown up with my family, my background, where I live, the things we value, our politics, all that kind of stuff, it's shaped me to be a particular kind of person. And so we would call that my personal space. That's the first space. That's the space you live in. And then you have this idea that when a person is transformed by the Lord, the moment I submit myself to the Lord and I step into what we would call the church, that God calls me out of that space I've been in formerly, and He calls me into something new and distinct. It's like a new type of family. And so I started in this other space, and along with that, a lot of times goes perhaps your unarticulated prejudices and your wiring and your suspicions about other people, your value of your own identity. And so, in this sense, in my sense in particular, just to be keeping it real, since we're keeping it real, and I don't know how many people will watch this anyway, I guess I can say whatever I want. So if I'm like a white man who's grown up in a white family, and we've always been, conservative, and we've always viewed ourselves a particular way, and anybody outside that another way, the space I've lived in is foreign to the reality that God wants for His people. So He calls me out of that. So that's my journey from my space to another space. And then Malcom, you would say, your journey's similar, right?
Yeah, I would say it. So for me, Jeff's in his space comes out of that into another space. And for me, having a more of an urban background as a Black man, totally in love with Black culture, yet after God has now called me and redeemed me, I don't allow my Blackness to trump my Jesusness. So then I enter into that space alongside of Jeff, which is that third space where God is more sovereign. He has the authority, and the goal is to really glorify Him. And then when we meet each other, that's when the fun begins, because we realize, like, how did you get in this space? How did I get in this space? And the thing that brought us together is the commonality of Jesus Christ, who has redeemed us, has now brought us together. And now we have to live under His authority as one. But that means now in this third space, there's a lot of grace given. There's a lot of love given, a lot of understanding. And also in that unity, it doesn't necessarily mean there'll be uniformity. But yet we come together as one, where there's a mutual respect and a mutual honor for one another, all of which is to glorify the Lord.
That's right. And I would even say you can choose within that third space to ignore one another, and to work against one another, not to value one another. Like you can, in a sense, you can violate that third space by not living up to the expectations that are there for that family. And then now, if I could parallel with what I think kind of the state of the world is, in a sense, obviously we know that we have in our culture today, we have struggles with what is going on. We've got racial divide, political divide. I mean, you just pick an area. We divide over football. I mean, we'll divide over anything.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, I would say we also violate what God has established for the broader community, our national community. And so we choose to marginalize one another, not value one another, hold prejudices against one another. And I think ultimately what you're seeing played out today on the national stage is a hindrance of national progress. And so there's a parallel of that in the world that we live in today.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So just to make sure that I am understanding, a third space is pretty much a group of people or two people coming in together, bringing their own space and then combining it with everyone. So it's like this mutual space for everyone.
I would say it's a mutual space, but one of the things is I try not to bring all of my baggage. Now, the thing is, all of my experiences have shaped me.
Mm-hmm.
As God is reshaping me, then I can't allow my culture to hinder my fellowship with my brother or sister who's in that space with me. And I think the Bible gives us many examples of this. Especially when Jesus comes in contact with the woman at the well in John chapter 4, he doesn't allow his Jewishness to hinder him from interacting with her. And so he's bringing that third space. And then all of a sudden she brings it, because now she's like, yo, you're awesome. Like, who are you? And so I think it's because when I bring all of my stuff in it,
Mm-hmm.
I have to bring it in such a way where I realize transformation has to occur, because all the stuff I bring in doesn't reflect God.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to come to grips with that. And then as I come to grips with that, I think also as Jeff is in that space with me, he's helping me realize that all of my stuff doesn't reflect God. I'm helping him that all of that cultural baggage doesn't reflect God. And then as iron sharpens iron, we learn what it means to fall under the authority of God, under his culture, under his reign and rule. And then we share a common vision, a common mission, a common goal, which is to glorify God. So yeah, I am bringing some of my stuff in, but a lot of this stuff I need to keep out. But I bring it in because I can't help it, because I'm human.
Mm-hmm.
But in that space, God is just chipping away at that stuff and removing it.
Well, and the thing that blesses that third space is the shared identity.
Yeah.
That when we recognize we share a new identity together, it means that I realize that past identity I had, I've got to let go of some of that. Not that I would ignore or even minimize the importance of my culture and my upbringing. No, I value that. But it's just I'm bringing that in with me, realizing that will give me certain hindrances that I have to fight through so that I can love my brothers and sisters in this new space. And so, Malcolm, you had this great illustration you used, and you talked about it in regard to when America goes through casualties or national crises. Can you articulate that a little bit, because I think that illustrates some of the third space idea and how we as a nation can push to a new identity.
Yeah. So the irony is that when we go through let's say a national tragedy or some type of act of terrorism, we're all Americans. So in that moment, the act of crisis has created technically a secular third space where now we're all Americans. It doesn't matter where you came from, no matter what your socioeconomic background is or the color of your skin, we're all Americans. But yet, when that's done, if there's an issue, let's say in the south side of Chicago or in California, it's like, oh, that's their issue. That's the urban issue, or that's the suburban issue. Now it's no longer American. Now it's just that group of people. And so what it's like the crisis brings us together as one. I think in the third space, from a biblical sense, it's almost this understanding that we're all sinners saved by the grace of God. And that through my regeneration, there's a transformation that's occurring that gives me a new identification with Christ, but also with my brother and sister in that space with me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's Definitely clarified a ton. So this kind of goes along with our next talking point, especially because we are getting into annual training. So how does the third space impact others in people serving roles in organizations? For example, like our annual training and attendees and partners.
Yeah. So I would say that when we talk about third space, then you begin to celebrate the diversity of thought that people bring to the table, not just the diversity of skin color, um, the diversity of gender, the diversity of people's economic background, and all that stuff kind of goes into this great creative think tank that I think for any organization can help drive whatever their bottom line mission is. And so in this third space, diversity is not only appreciated, it's also embraced to the point we leverage that diversity to have those ideas at the table because we recognize those ideas will make us better. Because some ideas come from people who come from some different backgrounds. And if we all came from the same background and we all think the same way, we'll probably have all the same ideas. But coming from a collective group of different experiences, we grew up differently from different parts of the country. I think being that third space, leveraging that, celebrating that, then it empowers people to kind of share their ideas because now we're affirming the dignity that they have. We're affirming the way they grew up. We're affirming the way they think. We're saying, look, be free to dream, be free to think. And we're going to leverage all of that because you know what? Your diversity is beautiful and it helps our organization thrive.
Yeah, and I think SC Thrive will find themselves organizationally blessed by stepping into this third space, and mission blessed, or organizationally hindered and mission hindered. That is, SC Thrive in itself is a bit of a third space. That is, so like if I take people from different backgrounds and I put them on a football team, they may have grown up different, completely different. They think different. They're different colors, speak different languages, maybe, who knows. But you put them on this football team, you give them a common goal, and now it's about the name on the jersey and the mission that we're here to accomplish. And they no longer look at each other as competitors or let their differences separate because they realize they're on a mission together. That's where I think like SC Thrive, you bring these people in from all these different backgrounds and they realize there's one purpose, one mission before them. And it's a way to view each other as teammates regardless of the diversity. And you realize that the diversity of the people aids the mission, gives you a commonality and a fun infrastructure. You're learning to love each other as new brothers and sisters and to really embrace the mission that you've been given. And so it can be really helpful. But if you don't embrace that third space, that we are one team together, then you become divisive. You fight over budgets. You fight over mission. You fight over what's most important, what you need to accomplish. And so there's warnings and there's benefits that come depending on how you guys respond to it.
Yeah, Jeff, would you also say that in terms of that third space with SC Thrive, that when you're living in it or working in it, then you better understand how people are gifted or their talents and abilities. So now I can put people in the right positions to play the right, to be in the right position to execute and do their job well. Using that football analogy, if you got the quarterback, you can't make the quarterback a lineman or a linebacker, right? You just can't do that. If it's basketball, the point guard can't be the center. So in that space, everybody starts to understand what they do well. And then I think what's great about it, if you see that, you can also pinpoint deficiencies in staff and see where you need to hire and bring people in to help fill the gaps. Because now you have people in the right position to fulfill the purpose of the organization.
That's good.
No, and I definitely think y'all hit a good point because I mean, as someone who works in SC Thrive, as part of SC Thrive, you see this a lot within our internal staff, but also you see this a lot with our partners because we do partner with a lot of different organizations that do completely different things. But regardless of how different all these organizations are, our common goal is just to make South Carolina a more self-sufficient place to be able to help everyone in South Carolina be where they need to be and where they want to be. So no, that perfectly definitely describes what we're trying to get in. So, this is your second time speaking at our annual training. Why do you find it important to keep educating people in this space?
Yeah, I think as a pastor of a church, I when I teach something one time, that doesn't mean somebody gets it. I mean, I can read something one time, doesn't mean I get it. And so I do think we've got to keep revisiting this. And I think with the volatility of the day we live in, we've got to have something that calls us beyond ourselves. It is so easy to become inward and self-focused and self-consumed. And if that comes into our churches, if it comes into our organizations, then we're no longer thinking about the good of the mission. We're thinking about the good of me or my department or what I want to accomplish. And the same thing in the church. And so that's a division that can ruin what we're trying to accomplish. I do think it's deeply hurt our nation. I think it hurts our churches deeply, and I think it can hurt an organization like SC Thrive if you begin to form little silos within your organization where it's just we want to accomplish this thing, and our little group is about this, rather than realizing that together we're working on this bigger mission. So that's it.
Great. No, that's great. So, we've definitely discussed a good bit about how this third space and unity and inclusion can help an organization as a whole. But something I want to learn a little more is, how does it promote personal growth and personal unity?
Well, I think, for me, just hanging out with Jeff, hearing his story, learning about how he grew up. And the irony is that he listened to a lot of music that I listen to. And so we realized that sometimes in this third space, we share a lot of commonalities that we never thought we would share. But also, the more time I spend with Jeff, I think I start to realize how selfish I can be sometimes, how I tend to think about life from my own perspective, from my own worldview. And so interacting with Jeff allows me to see life from a different perspective. And once I see it from his perspective, I recognize I need to have more grace. But I also see the inherent value that Jeff brings to my life. And so I think it starts to, for me, it's no longer about self-preservation. It's no longer about protecting myself. It allows me to be more transparent and vulnerable with him as we grow together, because I realize he makes me better. And when I realize he makes me better, then I begin to look at him not as somebody who's less than, or he is my equal. We love each other. There's equity there. There's a mutual respect and mutual honor given. And I think also for us, there's a mutual responsibility that we share, that we have to continue to have these conversations. So personally, I mean, just getting to know his family, and just laughing and joking around with them, it really enriches my life, especially if I'm not always in that culture. And it makes me appreciate that culture more so. And I'll tell you this, exposing my children to it, because we don't live in a homogeneous country. So they need to be exposed to different cultures. And so I think that's how diversity and equity and inclusion has impacted me personally and professionally.
And I'm also, and I would echo all that, brother. I mean, I don't know if you can pick up on here, but you and I have a great relationship, and I wish people were more open to that kind of thing. One of my struggles is that we're so divided as a country, and you can pick however it plays out, but at some point it's going to end up at politics. And we get to this thing where this is my camp, that's your camp, and we don't stray. We don't stray from our camp. We don't stray from our kind. We don't stray from our thoughts. But you can't. There's a limitation to the progress that you can achieve as a country that way. But it comes down to also as an individual. It hinders my own personal growth if all I'm going to be exposed to is people who think like me, look like me, vote like me, and if I can't ever extend grace and compassion. It would be my dream that we could eradicate this divide that we've got in politics, and I don't think we can change by legislating anything or mandating it or teaching our kids or what. We've got to have some sort of heart change. Now, I think that personally comes from an encounter with Jesus where he totally rocks your world. But we've got to have a transformational heart change that calls me outside of myself, where I feel like the Lord is looking at me going, Jeff, you're not all that. And the things you believe, they're not all great. And the systems you've bought into, they're not all perfect. In fact, there's a lot of flawed stuff in there. And I think the sooner we can stop worshiping at the altars of political ideologies, the sooner we can get towards working towards a common good for our communities, but even experiencing that good develops in my own heart and soul when I learn to love somebody who thinks like me, thinks different than me, votes different than me, views life different from me, and I become enriched in that regard.
So, definitely opening your heart, definitely being open mind. What are some other, like best practices that you believe are important in order to be more accepting and have more of that inclusion?
Well, I think the best practice truly is just listening to people. You ask questions and just listen, and you ask probing questions, because all of us in conversations, we may be saying the same word, but we're defining it differently. So it's understanding the definitions of the words we're using, asking probing questions, listening to each other. To me, I think we live in such a high-speed culture where we can get information like that. When people are talking to us, we're normally already thinking about a response before they even finish. So we're really not listening to them. So it's being actually present in the conversation, listening and engaging people and hearing their story, and not trying to come up with a solution or trying to fix them, but just kind of hearing who they are as a person. I think that has been a good best practice. Also, look, just hanging out with people. I mean, finding literally a third space, whether it's a restaurant or, someplace, even if we have to socially distance at a park or something like that, where we can sit down and have conversations and find common ground with one another. And I think we don't spend enough time doing that as well, just kind of intentionally hanging out with other people. That means I got to invite people to come hang out on the patio or someplace else, or invite them to a church in Columbia, South Carolina, on Hardscrabble at 10 o'clock for service to just kind of talk about things. So
there's got to be grace in that, though, right?
Right.
Because I mean, if we don't extend grace in that environment and embrace that grace in that environment, extend grace in that environment, because we're in such a such an easily triggered society now, where people, if you say one wrong word, they pigeonhole you into this. You must be a person who thinks like this, and so therefore, here's my response. Here's how I'm going to fight against that. And so what I've got to do is I've got to allow, Malcolm. If Malcolm and I are really going to be friends, and I think actually one thing I would encourage, and I've encouraged my own children to do, is you need to develop deep friendships with people who are just different than you. Like, you will benefit from that. It will bless you richly. And so that, if Malcolm says something to me like, hey, Jeff, I've always thought this. And if he says one of my trigger words, then I can be like, Malcolm, when you say that, it makes me think this. Are you meaning that? And then he can say, oh, no, I didn't know you were hearing it that way. No, what I meant was.
Right.
And I think if we would extend that kind of grace, you'd go a lot deeper in that regard. And then, I also think about your question, Maria, organizationally. Like, if I really want a good practice for how I can embrace diversity in my organization. So, like, as a church, we really believe, God has gifted all people. He has called us all to be a part of his kingdom. We all can contribute to the mission of God. And so one of the things we've done is there's been times where we're looking around the table and we'll say, we don't have any women here, or we don't have enough women here, or hey, why do we all look one culture here at the table? Like, we've got to have a broader spectrum that we're connecting to. So in my organization, I would make sure that I'm positioning, promoting, inviting people to the table who are just from different backgrounds, because I know we will be enriched as an organization if we can hear from different people who are shaped differently by their culture, their experiences, their education, and that we'll be the richer for it. And so I think one of the practices is intentionally inviting diversity into leadership in your organization.
And I would also, absolutely, Jeff, and also say that even in staff meetings, or when your organization has a meeting, setting time aside to just ask people, just tell us a story about growing up, just one positive thing growing up, or tell us about an experience growing up. So it's not just about business all the time. There has to be a setting where we come together as a staff to just share life. Because in that, you kind of get to hear certain things. You're like, oh, I never knew you grew up like that or with that. Especially in an organization like SC Thrive, when you're talking about dealing with social issues and people dealing with issues. I mean, you may be amazed that there may be somebody who you never thought of that could fix a problem because they've overcome a certain situation growing up. So I think it's setting aside those times to have those kind of conversations. Or It could be something as simple as a time where you celebrate after work hours. Let's have some type of diversity celebration where we kind of bring in food from different cultures and talk about this. Where did it come from and why do you like it? And growing up, when you ate it, why would you eat it on Sunday at mama's house or something like that? I think things like that, because now you're making the workplace a place where people love coming to, especially since we spend about 70% of our life at work, right? So wouldn't it be great to go to a place where, wow, not only do I get paid to be here, but people actually appreciate and celebrate and honor me when I'm here. Like, I'm valued here. Right. Because we live in a world where most people aren't valued. And I think if people know they're valued, they work harder, they'll give you 150% because they know it's more than a job now. It's like, this is family, and I believe in the mission of the family. So, yeah.
You know, and if I could tie this into, you know, how this might affect like social justice issues. I don't know if we're going to get into this, let's just go into it. So, so people from my maybe cultural background are having very different responses to what we see going on.
You're talking about white people. You're talking about white people?
I mean, you know, what? So white conservatives. How about that? If I say white conservatives, and so
okay,
the white conservative might have from maybe an African American progressive, they're just going to respond differently to, you know, so the way we're trying to address issues going on with authority, issues going on with race, issues going on in regard to our politics, protests, riots. I mean, it's just a different fundamental, even with NFL. So the NFL has embraced now this desire to promote racial harmony. And but there's very different responses going on to this, kneeling for the national anthem versus standing. So these things going on where people are wrestling with this. But here's the thing. If you can step beyond yourself, if you can get into this third space where it's no longer just about my culture, my view, my politics, my little world, and we get together in this, and let's just say, maybe I see players kneel at during the national anthem. And my initial response is, what is going on? Like, why don't they value where they live or whatever? And so my brother Malcolm says to me, he said, oh, I don't see it that way at all. Here's what I see them saying is that, you know, if we follow history, you know, my response would be that there's been a group of people that have been marginalized, and, you know, we do want to value the nation, but we want to make sure this is the kind of nation we can all value, you know, that kind of, and so, but you see, if I love Malcolm and then he's sharing this with me, it changes. Like, then I pause and I go, oh, wait, well, maybe I'm not thinking about, maybe I'm just thinking about this very monoculturally. Hearing you say that to me, okay, and then the idea is that as we go down this road together, then I am inclined to adopt causes that would promote a deep unity, equal value, equal opportunities as we move forward, regardless of backgrounds. And I might have been blind to those in my monocultural, experience. And so I think this is another benefit of learning to you love people beyond yourselves. I really think, honestly, this could change so many things in our culture if we would embrace this.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, Jeff, that I think also it's the thing where too often in this country we treat people as if one group is monolithic, as if, you know, everybody who's Latino thinks this way, or Latina thinks this way, everybody who's Black thinks this way, or everybody's white thinks this way. And the truth is, we're not like that at all. Like, there are so many different subcultures to these main cultures. And at the end of the day, you know, I think we got to get to the point where we recognize that, you know, not all African Americans are Democrats, not all whites are Republicans, not all, you know, it's just, and if we can get beyond that and start seeing people as individuals, I think then we'll realize that, you know, there's the beauty that I can embrace, because we don't all think the same. We don't all talk the same. And so that's one of the issues as well, I think, to this diversity conversation, because if we're not careful, we can start, you know, putting people in one group, say, okay, everybody's like this. And no, you can't do that, because that's a recipe for disaster, I think, as well.
No, and I definitely see why you say that it is so important. And it's the best practice to just sit there and listen to what the person has to say, and also to really make sure that even though you're both speaking the same language, you have to understand their definitions of what they're saying, because, you know, it could easily get turned into another way. But, you know, if you sit there, you listen, you ask those probing questions and really get to the bottom of what they mean, some situations can just end completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, I just want to ask y'all, do you have anything else you would like to add or anything else you would like to say?
I mean, I would say I think this journey, if an by being a part of this journey, can be very uncomfortable. So you have to be willing to embrace the discomfort, but the reward that comes from it is so awesome. It is worth dealing with the brief discomfort that's going to come about. And I think to any organization, SC Thrive, or anyone else, or any church, by going on this journey, because here's the thing, Jeff and I, neither one of us have arrived. This is a lifetime journey, but being on it will so enrich not only you personally, but those who are in your concentric circles of context, your spheres of influence. And I think it just benefits everybody. So I think my last big challenge or word of encouragement is to embrace the discomfort and watch what happens. It's going to be amazing.
That's good. Yeah, and I would add too that there's a cost you pay if you really embrace this. There's a cost you pay, because there will be people from your cultural background who they're not going to like what you're saying. They're not going to agree. They're not going to understand. And so you're going to take shots as you move forward if you really try to push for this. And over the years, if I could show you some of the emails I've gotten, let you hear some of the criticisms I've gotten Malcolm to, the people who are they just have these blinders on about how they view the world. And so if you were to go back and say, Jeff, if you go back 22 years ago and you make this more of a monocultural, monolithic church experience, it'll be a lot more peaceful for you. Would you do it? And I'd say, no, that's like saying, would I like to see a picture that's painted with just one shade? Would I like to eat a meal that's just flavored with one spice? They're like, no, not at all. God has painted in this world a beautiful mosaic of colors and experiences, and brings those together in humanity. And oh man, if we could just learn to value what God has done for one another, and what he could do for us if we would embrace that, well, then we could become just so much more appreciative of what God has really done in this beautiful world, rather than fight to have it look like just one small thing that reflects just me and my thoughts and opinions. And so my hope is that we can move beyond that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. Again, this is Dr. Malcom and Dr. Jeff. They will be speaking at our 10th annual training, which will be held virtually. If you haven't registered already, please do so. Visit scthrive.org/annual training. You will not only hear their amazing breakout session, but many others. Thank you so much for being with us today, guys.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.